guys. So, my goal of this video will be not to say the word Let's see if I can accomplish that. Not saying the word Kind of a big task, but we'll give it a shot. So, it is pouring down rain, and I'm going to hide inside this restaurant for a minute and do my update. It was a good day. It was a good day, guys. I just said I said I wasn't going to say at all. That's funny. Okay, so let's do a rundown of the day so I can get to my notes and put them aside. We started out the day with David Fry taking the stand, and I can fully admit that I was very concerned about David taking the stand. I have seen I've got to not say during this. That's my goal. So and not even So I have seen all of the videos that were presented on David Fry, as well as meeting with him many times myself. And I was really concerned, not just because I saw David's videos and him at the refuge, and not just because I met with him myself, but also because I've seen him in the pretrial release hearings that he's attempted. He has tried to get out on bail multiple times, pretrial release, and was denied. The interesting thing about David Fry is that he is somebody that the media has loved to, the media has loved to discredit. And so I've seen the areas that they have used against him, and I think it's been unfair. In all honesty, I think David is actually full of integrity and character. He is somebody I consider to be one of my heroes, not just because he made it to the very end, but because of the reasons he refused to leave. And the reasons he refused to leave the refuge were, one of the reasons was because Sean Anderson would not leave, and he refused to leave him behind, and Sandy. And if you think about all the people who fled, and this isn't to shame them, maybe it is, David didn't really know these people, and he refused to leave because he didn't want to abandon Sean and Sandy and Jeff. And I think that is something that doesn't happen nowadays, right? To have somebody actually sacrifice their own life for somebody that they don't even know, and even though he was given an opportunity to leave, and he refused to do so because he didn't want the live stream to be taken down. So David's one of my heroes, actually. It's going to drive me crazy, but I have to break the habit of saying by calling myself out on saying So, started out with David, and I was very concerned. I'd actually cautioned a few of the attorneys about him taking the stand because I was at his pretrial release hearings, and he became really upset with the judge one day, Judge Jones, because he said some really accusative, disrespectful things to David, and David in turn called him a bigot and got up and left the courtroom. And I was concerned that the prosecution would prod at him and make him react. And if they brought up things that are triggers for him, you got to understand that LaVoy was somebody he had a lot of respect for and was murdered by the very people that are now holding him hostage. And so I was very concerned that he would be prodded and he would potentially say something damning on the witness stand that wasn't true to who he is, but is true to the trauma he has endured. So all that to say, I highly cautioned some of the attorneys not to bring him to the stand out of complete concern for him, because I have seen how these prosecutors behave, and I know that David Fry has been in jail now since February 11th and has not received any treatment for his post-traumatic stress syndrome that he has endured. He's received no counseling for what he witnessed at the refuge those final days, and I thought that it was too big of a risk. But he wanted to take the stand, and he did. He did great. He really, his true colors showed through. He gave a very accurate description of why he went to the refuge and who he is, and I think that in the end, it was a good thing that he took the stand. I'm not sure I would have taken the gamble as his attorney because so many great witnesses have already come to the stand, but I'm really proud of David for doing it. And I know that David feels like he was heard, because even if Maxine refuses to report on the truth with Oregon Live, she's the main reporter, and Conrad with OPB, even if they refuse to report the truth, David Fry was able to give his story and have it be on the record. And that meant a lot to David, and I have a lot of respect for him for being cautioned as much as he was and still wanting to take the witness stand. Even with the damning videos that had been made after LaVoy's murder, he still believed that it was important that he needed to take the stand. He did great. So I might break this video in half and just do it go through quickly the witnesses and then do an update on what we can expect from here on out, because there is still some more stuff to come. So David took the stand, and let's see, I guess I'll do a quick, I'm not sure anything with me is quick, but I say that a lot. No, I'm going to just go through David first. Okay, so David took the stand, and I'm on the wrong page. Okay, so they asked him if he swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and he said, "I do, so help me Jehovah." And they asked him where he had worked, and I'm going to tell a little bit of his story, because I think it's important that it gets out. So he, from up until 2008, he was working for, oh no, I just lost my spot. Okay, for auto industry, and when it collapsed in 2008, he went to work for his dad in the dental field, which helps me understand why it's been really important to him that he get his teeth cleaned and that he has good hygiene. You know, his dad is a dentist, okay? These aren't, anyway, he's a clean person, and he's brought up a lot about wanting to have his teeth cleaned, and he's been denied, and he said, "I've been here longer than 6 months, they still won't let me have my teeth cleaned, and that shouldn't be an extra, that's kind of a basic necessity." So he worked for his dad from 2008 until 2016, scheduling patients and helping repair things. He has no criminal record. He has never participated in a protest before. He's lived a very normal life. Let's see. He did not know anybody. So what's important to understand with this charge, the conspiracy charge, most of the people being tried right now didn't even know each other. And some of them never met. So, like, he never met Ken Menbach, and he only met, he only met Ryan Bundy long enough to shake his hand. And the rest of his interactions here and there were with LaVoy. He understood that there was a protest happening at an unoccupied building, and he wanted to go be a part of that. He, let's see, he had followed LaVoy on his YouTube channel and communicated with him in chats on the YouTube channel, and that was his only attachment to these people's refuge. He had purchased his book before, and he had read that. He heard that it was an armed protest. He knew they were occupying an unoccupied building. He had a premonition that LaVoy Finicum would be killed at this protest, and that he wanted to go and meet LaVoy. He understood that it was about government abuse. He knew that it was peaceful. He said, "I have seen protests where they were burning cars and buildings. I knew I would not be a part of anything like that." He didn't really, he hasn't believed in war. Before this, he has not been an advocate of gun ownership. He has never heard of public lands in Ohio because there are no public lands in Ohio. It is a Western issue, he said. He came because he wanted to talk about the things that were important to him, one of which was Fukushima. In 2011, Japan had their nuclear meltdown, and it was melting through the core, and we chose to fill it with water. Or not we, but Japan. It is now leaking into the Pacific Ocean, and he actually quoted how much is leaking into the Pacific Ocean, and I didn't write that down. But it's a big concern to him. He came because he wanted to bring attention to these things, and he knew he would be able to get media attention and do that. He was disappointed when he learned that the media didn't want to talk to him him about why he was really there. They just wanted to paint the picture of him as being unstable and crazy. He said he is not a fan of firearms. Let's see. Defend Your Base, which was his YouTube channel, had nothing to do with military. It had to do with gaming, so he was a video gamer. He spoke to his coworker Mindy, that he's known for 8 to 10 years. He communicated with her on January 7th when he was en route to the refuge. I want to say he drove like 2,200 miles, if I'm remembering right, to get to the refuge. He told her on the way there that he might be murdered because if our government will kill unarmed people, and this is a protest where some people are armed, then they will surely kill me. Or not me, I'm sorry, that they will surely kill people. He hoped that wouldn't be the case, but he brought up Eric Holder, and he said he knew Eric Holder had taken over a federal facility, and he was not charged in the end, and he absolutely believed that this being an empty facility, that there would be no actual charges, that this would last a few days, he would get to maybe be on the news and talk about things that are a concern of his, and then he would be on his way. He stopped and picked up supplies. He picked up 10 toothbrushes, bless his heart, and shampoo and conditioner and other cleaning supplies he wanted to bring to share. He arrived on January 8th in the dark. He was greeted by a man, by men asking who he was. After he explained he was just there to be a supporter and bring them supplies and see what they were doing, they moved the truck and let him through. The next day he met LaVoy, who asked if he would help him work on computers. He stayed at the firehouse. There were not a lot of people around because at the firehouse downstairs there were artifacts, and LaVoy and the others didn't want them being disturbed. So where David stayed, there weren't a lot of people staying. They weren't allowed to come and go. They didn't want to upset the artifacts that were covered in rat feces. Let's see. He noticed there was a lot of people working there. Let me see. Oh, I'm sorry. The defense asked if he knew that people worked at the refuge. He said yes, it was clear people worked there. There were desks with family pictures, but he said, my understanding is that they were on vacation, and that after their vacation was up, their managers had told them not to return to work. They could have returned to work, and he says they would have moved out of the way for them and let them do anything they needed to do. But the management had told him not to come back to work, and that was his understanding. They asked him if he attempted to hack into Ryan Curtis's computer. So this is I know, roads are flooding. I'm hiding inside for a minute doing this video. The police are coming. Let's see, they're flooding on the coast just a few hours from here. So they asked him if he hacked into the government computer, and he explained it beautifully, that he didn't actually even use the hard drive of the government computer. He plugged in his hard drive, and he booted it up from his hard drive, and nothing on the government system was ever used or accessed, and that's all traceable. So the prosecution is saying that he hacked into their system, and that's not true. He used his hard drive and then basically used the government's computer screen and keyboard is essentially all, and he actually explained how a computer needs a hard drive to be a computer. So he didn't actually use the government's computer, he used his own computer, and in order to access his computer he had to use their screen and their keyboard. The entire time he was there, he never used any internet other than his Wi-Fi hotspot that he had on his phone. Let's see. They showed a picture of wildlife that he had seen, and he described it as an animal that had the body of a squirrel, the face of a squirrel, but the body of a groundhog, and that he thought it was interesting, and he loves animals, so he went outside and videoed it. During the time that he was there, they received hundreds of Korans because John Ritzheimer was they said John Lorie Kramer was anti-Muslim. And while he was there, he started to read one of the Qurans, and they showed a video of him quoting the Quran that talks about those that are Christians and servants of the Lord will be saved and protected. And his point was that ISIS doesn't follow the Quran, and that to be anti-Muslim is to be basically anti-American. And this video showed him as a very peaceful individual, where he was saying he was very upset that a few of the protesters that came were very disgruntled towards Muslims as a whole, and he felt that that wasn't very American when people were fighting for freedoms and liberty for all. And so he wanted to quote some of the Quran, and he was very upset with some of the statements that had been made by some of the people who were very critical towards that race or that religion. And his statement was that we needed to stop the hate and the bigotry. He wasn't a fan of war or violence. He really wants there to be peace. They asked if he's Muslim, and he said no, he's Judeo-Christian. He's not a Muslim. They asked if he made the video with LaVoy in the basement with the rat feces, and he said yes. He was down there with the rat feces and the artifacts. That they actually brought a bunch of the artifacts in because they were outside under the snow, and they felt that was very disrespectful. And so they went ahead and brought him inside. They asked him if he got to talk about Fukushima, and he said he tried multiple times, but the media wasn't interested in truly covering the reason he was there. They were, he said, they weren't interested in talking about that. They were more interested, okay, listen to this, trolls, the human side of my trolls, I want you to listen. They were more interested in ridiculing me. So, this was a human moment, right, where we can all relate on a human level. And so for the trolls that have been out there making, like, photoshopped pictures of me and other people, I hope that you understand that what you do has a very negative and evil impact on society as a whole. And when David was able to identify on the witness stand that his story couldn't get out because all they were interested in doing was ridiculing him, it spoke not just about the media, but about humanity in general, and those of us that would rather ridicule people than try to understand them. And so for the human side of my trolls out there, I want you to think about your own life and the things that people disagree with you on, and maybe for just a moment try to ask yourself, how would this make me feel if people were doing this to me? And even if it wouldn't really upset you or put you into some negative state, does it do anything to promote humanity? Does it do anything to promote unity or peace? And if the answer is no, then I would hope that you would stop and realize that you're being a part of the breakdown of this world, of this country, and you're doing nothing to actually benefit your own human race. You know, talk about eating your own alive. I hope you think about that. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. Anyway, they asked if he had a weapon before LaVoy Finicum was shot, and he said no. He never touched or held a weapon. Or, I'm sorry, they said, did you have a weapon? He said, no, I never had a weapon before LaVoy was shot. I didn't go there to possess a weapon. They asked if, did you come here to prevent workers from doing their jobs? And he said, absolutely not. Workers never came into the topic. I knew it was an empty facility and a protest was happening, and I wanted to be a part of that protest, and I was hoping that I could bring some issues to light. Let's see, it was a really big deal that they keep the place clean. While he was there, he chopped wood, washed dishes, worked on computers. He sent a message at one point to a family member and said he was at an armed protest. And then he wrote a note on January 23rd at the refuge, and it said that he was leaving. And they read this note, and it basically just said, sorry this couldn't work out better. but my time here is basically done. And you could twist the note a few different ways, so I think the defense just wanted to bring the note out and ask what it was about and hear the story from David. You know, that really works best typically when you go to somebody directly and you just ask them, hey, what was that about? I was really confused about this. A lot of times you'll actually get the straight answer and you won't have to create lies or slander or gossip, but that's just my perception, I guess. So the purpose of that note was, he actually threw it in the garbage, but it was brought into evidence by the prosecution because it was obviously located in the garbage after the protest was over. And he said that was in regards to some people speaking a lot of hate, specifically towards Muslims, and he started to feel like if there was this much hate in a few of these people, that maybe he was in the wrong group of people. And he threw it away because he said it was only one or two people, and he didn't want them to set the stage for everybody there because he knew that wasn't how everybody felt. But he really didn't want to be a part of any hate. He didn't attend any meetings except for church meetings. He wasn't invited to anything with planning. He learned about the fence being cut, and which was later explained too, but at any rate, the fence being cut, the cameras being taken down, he learned about all that from the media. LaVoy invited David to the January 26th meeting, and he sent him a text message, and David was helping Lee Rice with some computer stuff, so he didn't get the text message, so Victoria took his place in the truck. Had he received the text message, he would have gone, and he believes that the bullet that went into Ryan Bundy would have gone into him. So I think that was really God's hand of provision on David, because I'm not sure that David could have endured watching LaVoy Finnecum, who he had a great deal of respect for. I'm not sure he could have watched him be murdered. And I think that was God's hand on David for sure, and I think that the people who went, God will strengthen and empower to deal with what they witnessed, and I think he protected David. And by David staying at the refuge, he was able to get that live stream up and actually protect Sean and Sandy and Jeff. So that was kind of interesting to learn that he was invited. He had heard from Pete Santilli's live stream that two people had been shot that night. He had learned later, way later, after midnight, that it was LaVoy. Jeff Banta spotted 20 vehicles coming towards the refuge, and rumors said that they were all heading to ambush the refuge. So again, for our haters out there, if you could just for a minute for me, I don't know, get a glass of wine or something and try to relax for just a minute and think about what you would do in this position if one of your friends had been killed. You wanted to leave an environment, you packed your bags and you're ready to go, but you believed that either you would be killed on the way out or that the people left behind would be killed. And so you choose to stay despite your own struggles or mental issues that you might have. And you know, if you really listen to the truth of the story, I think you might have a lot of respect for David and think to yourself that perhaps if you were ever in need or in a major crisis, that he might be the person you want by your side, because he thought quickly under pressure. He got that live stream up and going, and he refused to walk out. He was even willing at the end, you know, we all say liberty or death. David was truly the only one who embraced that all the way, to the point where when he heard he would be raped in prison and abused, he contemplated death being a better option than losing his liberty. And while you guys mock him for becoming suicidal, he actually just upholds the very things that our founding fathers laid out when they said that their freedom was worth even their own lives. To die with freedom versus living in bondage. And maybe you could see David in a different light and actually see that that crazy guy who stayed till the end and was suicidal was actually pretty heroic and pretty brave when many people were not able to live up to what he was able to live up to. Okay, moving on. At this point, they start talking about LaVoy's murder and David's body language changed. He became a little bit hunched over, and he appeared to me depressed and sad. They asked him if how he handled the death, and he said that he wasn't going crazy after he died, but he really wasn't completely sane. That what he had learned, he had been told by Victoria Sharp's video after that night, so it was the middle of the night on the 26th to 27th, he had been told that LaVoy was shot with his hands in the air and murdered, and he believed that at any moment he was also going to be murdered. And so he said he wasn't crazy, but he wasn't sane. He said thought he was going to die, and he didn't care what people thought of him anymore. He also stated that he would like to believe that angels are what he hears and not a mental disease, when they were talking about him having schizotypal disorder, which is a form of schizophrenia. Basically, under extreme pressure, he becomes much more paranoid, much more anxiety-filled. Let's see, he brought up the fact, and this is important, and he brought up this continued talk about these two Navy SEALs that showed up on January 25th, and they left on the 27th. They were destructive, they were rude, they were aggressive, they smoked in the buildings, they kicked in a door, and we believed them to be two of the names that will come out as informants. And that's important because some of the destruction that was shown was in the location where they were staying. And so if these 13 names that have been redacted in the court records, if they're released and they can prove that some of the damage that was left at the facility was actually done by federal agents, that's not going to look very good for the United States of America when they're the ones who are responsible for this. So these Navy SEALs were there half a day before LaVoy was killed, and before they came, the door was not kicked in or damaged, and after they came is when the door was kicked in. Let's see. They reported that Sean would be arrested for the statements that he made after LaVoy was killed, and they said Sean was not leaving, correct? He said no, Sean was not going to leave, and if Sean didn't leave, I wasn't going to leave because I believed that he would have been killed had I left. Can you guys just think about that for a moment? I mean, this kid has had a pretty comfortable life. He has no criminal record, never been arrested. His dad is a dentist. He works in a dentist's office. You guys paint him, some of the trolls paint him to be crazy, but just think about what he was under at that moment. His hero had been killed. People that he barely knew were going to be left behind, and when he was offered a free pass to leave, he said, not if everybody doesn't leave together, because I don't believe they'll make it out alive. Shame on you if you can still mock and criticize him. I do pray that God has mercy on you for that. Let's see. Everybody there had a mistrust for the FBI. The FBI cut off their phone service, then dropped off a phone in a box for them that had no speaker and was a flip phone. So they couldn't all speak to the FBI. They could only do it one at a time, which allowed the FBI to try to isolate them. Remember how Ammon told us that they isolate, they demonize, they isolate, and then they come in and attack or destroy or kill. So they were trying to isolate them with his phone they had sent in. They also wanted to remove his internet connection, so they sent him in a flip phone. If you guys can just listen to this information and process the fact that this is your United States of America, this is your country, this is how it handles civil disobedience and protesters that occupy empty buildings. This is your country. Drones were flying overhead. David was receiving 3 phone calls a day, and he would speak for around 3 hours at a time to the federal agents. He was talking on the average of 9 hours a day to FBI, and he only took the calls because he believed if he didn't, they would send the drones in and kill him. And so he was trying to keep communications open. They continued telling him that they wanted a peaceful resolution. This is after they ambushed everybody on Highway 395, started shooting at LaVoy's vehicle at the first stop, shot at LaVoy before he even stepped out of the vehicle, and then shot him 3 times in the back after shooting him once in the front with a rubber bullet, which is what brought his hands down. This is the United States of America. So they had the drones flying overhead. He's on the phone at this point 9 hours a day. Even if they called in the middle of the night, he would take the call because he didn't want them to sneak up on him and kill him. Earlier, before LaVoy... Sorry, phone call. Earlier, he did not believe that he would be arrested. He knew he went to an empty building to protest with a group of other people, and you got to understand the media was painting this in a completely different picture than what was actually going on, which is what we've heard from witness after witness after witness that showed up at the refuge. So when you show up at this environment, you don't think to yourself, we're going to get arrested. You think, I wonder if we should be here after dark. Maybe we're going to get a fine for trespassing in this empty building. But you definitely don't think you're going to get arrested or surrounded or killed. And their charges, this is important, you guys, because their charges are conspiring to impede federal officers through threats, force, and intimidation from carrying out their official duties. And what we're finding through all these testimonies is that most of these people never even communicated with each other, the actual defendants that are in jail. And the ones who did never talked about federal employees doing their job. There was no conspiracy. They came here to protest the government. Let's see. He wanted to read some of the text messages that he had received on his Defend Your Base YouTube page that would help the jury to understand why he was afraid and why he was willing to commit suicide in the end instead of being arrested. And the things that were being said to him were awful. And he has never been to jail. So again, you guys have to understand that had he been to jail, he might not have come across as crazy or paranoid. But since he had not been to jail and he didn't have a criminal record, he was very afraid. And he, at those moments, definitely believed, after LaVoy being killed, that he would rather die than go to jail for 11 years and be raped repeatedly. Okay, listen to this. So all these text messages are coming in onto his page, and he is told that he cannot read or show these text messages to the jury, that that's irrelevant. But something that stood out to me is that after the 26th, they all left the refuge, and they went and stayed in a tent. Okay, again, 2 weeks in a tent where it's below, like 14 degrees below. I mean, can we just give Sean and Sandy and Jeff and David just a little, like, applaud? Because they could have left, and instead they went and camped in the snow to leave the buildings, hoping once they learned what their charges would be, hoping that the FBI would back off and let them leave if they vacated these buildings, now that they've learned these buildings are this huge deal and that they're keeping people from coming to work based on the charges that they're being told that are coming down on them. So there were people, and it was told that there were people in the bushes with night cameras, night vision, that were watching them. When you have schizotypal disorder, you're going to struggle with paranoia anyway, and now he's in basically a war scene, war zone, and there's men in the bushes that are watching him. And so he hung up with some string, some cans around the outside of his tent, so that if anybody came up to his tent in the middle of the night, he would hear them. He also put some logs around his tent, so that hoping that somebody would maybe trip, and he would hear them. And then the FBI called him the next day after seeing him do this and told him that they were going to add new charges. Okay, so they're not trying to de-escalate the scene. They have people hiding in the bushes. They're bringing in all kinds of equipment to surround them. They know the stress that these people are under. And they call him and they say, we see that you hung up cans and put logs around your tent. We're now going to add charges of you fortifying the environment. At what point point do we have a right when we feel like our life is in danger, regardless of who the enemy is? When you feel you're going to be sniped and killed in the middle of the night, at what point do we have the right to do something to protect ourselves, even to hang up pop cans without facing new charges, okay? Charge after charge after charge can be brought on us. And now we learn that for hanging up pop cans and putting logs around our tent, we're gonna get fortifying charges. So these things are important to remember, because if you remember David's state of mind on the final day when he was thinking, I might as well kill myself instead of going to jail, because they're going to get me on so many charges. After that is when he went and he drove the government vehicle, and he made the video where he was pretty upset, and he said, here's more charges you can add. I drove a company vehicle, or government vehicle, whatever you want to say. That we didn't know when he made that video that the FBI had just told him he was going to get more charges for hanging up pop cans and putting logs around his tent. So understanding that, I kind of get now why he made that video. At some point, you kind of feel like enough is enough. Just do whatever you're going to do to me. He said on February 10th, there were 8 Bearcats, which are very large tank-like trucks that surrounded the refuge. 8, you guys. So remember, we're watching it from a media perspective, but when you're actually at the refuge, things are very different that's going on, and you realize they are going to kill us. There was no warning. He knew he was about to die. He got the live stream up and going because they finally cut off the other phone, and he got the live stream up and going with Gavin. Then he had Michelle Fiore on the line and Franklin Graham. Everybody tuned in, and he started to believe that maybe help was on the way. But he wanted these people to come to the refuge to get them out. So they finally agreed to come to the refuge, and David said he became suicidal because of all these messages about him heading to jail for 10 to 20 years and being raped. And it was actually an FBI agent that talked him out. I think it was Mark, he said, not Informant Mark McConnell, FBI agent who was doing the negotiating. And his attorney asked him, did you like Mark? And he said, yeah, outside of being an FBI agent, he seemed like a very authentic man, and I felt like I could respect him, and I felt like I could trust him. He was listening to me, and I felt like he heard my concern about what would happen to me in jail. And he told me, he promised me that when I went to jail for this, that I would not be assaulted, and I would be segregated, as everybody is at night. They asked him why he wanted everybody to say hallelujah, and he said he just felt like there was such a presence of evil there that there was something about hearing them say hallelujah, and it wasn't because he was crazy. He kind of laughed about it, and he said, I just thought with all of the evil around me that before I walked into the presence of these people, hearing them say hallelujah might make them be a little bit less evil, and they might consider being a little bit more kind when they took me in. They did find, David Fry and Jeff did find a camera in the woods that had been watching them, which added definitely to some paranoia to realize that they were being watched. When they asked him why he didn't trust the FBI originally to come out, he kept baiting the FBI. You see, David Fry's a really highly intellectual individual, and he knows a lot. He's got a great memory. And he was trying to test the FBI to see if they were being honest all along when they were telling me he could come out. And he said, why can't you have the president pardon me? I didn't come here for what you guys are implying I came here for. And they said, in order for that to happen, you have to go through the court system. And he said Mark Rich was an individual who had fled to, I think, Switzerland. Yes. And President Clinton pardoned him on his last day in office. And he asked if that could possibly be done for him. And the FBI agent said it possibly could be, but you'd have to come into custody first and go through the court system. Well, David knew that was a lie because this individual, Mark Rich, was in Switzerland and did not come back to the United States to be pardoned. And so he felt like they were either ignorant of the information or they just were lying to him. And so he wasn't going to trust them. When the prosecution, so my biggest concern with David was prosecution. These guys are unethical and they definitely have the presence of evil around them, and I was concerned that they would incite or use things to trigger him. And he actually handled himself really wonderfully, and the prosecution didn't have much to go on. But they asked him why, when they promised a peaceful resolution, why would he object to that? And his answer was, because it's really weird for the bully to ask for a peaceful resolution. Gotta hand it to him. That makes a lot of sense. When you feel like you're being bullied by somebody and then the bully shows up after killing one of your friends and says, really, we just want a peaceful resolution. During that time, they would not acknowledge his grievances. So even though they were saying we want a peaceful resolution, they wouldn't talk to him about any of the reasons that he was there. And when you're protesting your government, if you don't do something that puts some pressure on your government to listen, especially when you have a government our size, you're not going to be heard. So here he felt he was in a position where his government should have been asking him, kind of like President Obama did with the Black Lives Matter movement when he brought them into the White House. And he said that he felt what happened at Ferguson brought great attention to the things that they had been suffering. Well, this would have been a situation you would have expected to be similar, that somebody would have allowed this to bring attention to the abuses that these people were suffering. And instead, all they continued saying is, we want a peaceful resolution. David Fry said they said that over and over, but never offered what the only peaceful resolution was him turning himself in and going to jail. That was their idea of a peaceful resolution. Well, when you're protesting your government for abuses, your idea of a peaceful resolution is probably not going to be you going to jail. It's going to be you guys sitting down and having an actual intellectual meeting about the abuses that the people are enduring under the federal government and the laws that are being continuously broken without any accountability. Hillary Clinton. So that's just a side thought I have. You're probably going to want to actually sit down and talk and feel like you're getting somewhere. They didn't offer any of that. They were trying to provoke a fight. Shauna came and said, did you know that it would be negative 14 degrees when you arrived? He said no. Let's see, Victoria took my place. Okay, I'm just about done, and then I'm going to probably cut this video off and just title it for David, and then I'll do one video for everybody else. Ken's attorney asked if he ever talked to David. I noted at this point he seemed calm now and relaxed, and was definitely not as uptight or uncomfortable as he was when he was talking about LaVoy's death. He said he never had a conversation with Ken. His only conversation with Ammon was long enough to meet him and shake his hand. Which, again, these are conspiracy charges we're facing, so it's kind of important that these individuals never even spoke. So they asked if he felt at any point as though he was able to get through to the media and feel like he had been heard at this protest. And his answer was, the media is supposed to be the watchdog for the people, but they become the lapdog for the government. The media is supposed to be the watchdog for the people, but they have become the lapdog for the government. That was absolutely accurate. The media is supposed to report to us the truth of what's going on, and instead they hide the truth and they report to us what they want us to hear so that we stay asleep. And that makes them a lapdog instead of a watchdog, which is why we then have to become the watchdogs for them. Let's see. He said before January 26th it was peaceful. After 26, women were freaking out. They were screaming. They were taking their children and leaving. Victoria's family wasn't sure if it was her that was killed. Everybody was upset. Cross-examination said The car had to be moved out of the way for you to enter the refuge, correct? And he said, correct. And he said, you compared this to MLK, correct? And he said, correct. And he said, even with 18,000 rounds of live ammunition, you thought this was comparable to MLK? And then again, he stated, actually this was objected by Ryan, saying that David never said he understood or knew what kind of ammunition or weapons were at the facility. He said he was actually not into guns. And so to assume that he knew the ammunition, which it's not even a lot of ammunition for the amount of people that were there, as we've learned, but nonetheless, that was actually sustained, and he didn't have to answer that. They said, you're not a gun person, correct? And he said, correct. And then he says, so you own guns, but you did not bring them, is that correct? Well, David's never said he owned guns, but the prosecution's always trying to get you nervous to slip up, and he says, no, that's not correct. I don't own guns, nor did I bring any to the refuge. My dad does own guns, but I do not. He said after, and then the prosecution said, so after January 26th, once the leadership was arrested, how was the environment at the refuge? Again, trying to trick David. So each individual defendant is going to face their own charges. So everybody can end up innocent and one person can be guilty or have, whatever. And I really believe they're trying to make sure that the Bundys stay guilty. So they wanted to point out that after all the leadership was gone, how was the environment at the refuge? And he answered, I wouldn't say that all the leadership was arrested on the 26th. I would say that those who were most organized were arrested on the 26th. Then he asked him, before the 26th you never held a gun, correct? And he said, correct. Well, apparently they have a picture or somebody testified that he had touched somebody's gun. And this is all the prosecution has to go off of here. You said you didn't hold any guns before the 26th, but here you touched and he named off this specific gun. And David says, oh, like it was a pistol, and this guy showed me his gun, and then I gave it back to him, but he said I didn't possess a gun. So then the prosecution says, okay, so you did in fact have a gun before the 26th, but you didn't possess a gun before the 26th? And at this point I'm thinking, is this seriously all you have to go on, is to try to pin him into the fact that he like physically held a gun for 2 seconds and turned it? Is it illegal to pick up somebody's gun and look at it and set it back down? No, of course not. After the 26th, he actually carried a gun for self-defense. Before the 26th, he had no gun. One last thing, I think I'm almost to the end. David pointed out that the guns were left because the people on the 26th were told when they came through the checkpoint that they couldn't bring their weapons with them. So you have 25, 30 people leaving the refuge, all leaving their guns behind, but they were not arrested. Most of them were not arrested. So follow me with this for a minute. So I think like 36 guns, if I'm right, I might be totally wrong because it's been a long 6 weeks, but I think like 36 guns were presented as evidence for the 7 defendants. But the 7 defendants had none of their own guns included in the 37 or 36 guns presented. So all these people were allowed to leave the refuge, but not take their weapons with them, thus leaving them behind as evidence for the 7 who are now standing trial. Does that not sound a little bit like being framed? People are allowed to leave, but they have to leave their weapons behind, but then the people who get arrested are now charged with weapons charges. The weapons that the FBI wouldn't let the other people who actually own the guns take out of the refuge. Welcome to the United States of America, where their main job is to set you up and get you in jail, and it's not actually to protect your liberty or your rights or your freedom. Okay, last thing. Did you think you were going to be killed if they saw you with a gun? And David said at one point I was suicidal at the end, and I walked right in front of where the FBI had come in, and I believed they would kill me, but they didn't. And this is right up at the very end. So he was being very honest. Let's see. Did you move on? I already said that. That's it. Okay, that's it for David Fry. I think that was long, and I don't know how long this is because it's not showing me. So I think I'm going to end this video, and if you guys want to tune in, then I'll go ahead and do this next video, and I'll include Dwayne Schrock's testimony, and let's see, Dwayne Schrock, Tim Puckett, who was a rancher in Burns. Is that all we had today was David, Tim Puckett, and Dwayne? That might have been all we had. Okay. So should I just finish, you guys? I wonder if I should just finish. No, I'm going to sign off because my food is cold. I'm going to eat, and then I'm going to do a live stream, and I'll title it for Tim Puckett and Dwayne. So, and then I'll look through the questions too. Let's see. In this. If there's any questions I can quickly answer. Yeah, this whole thing is just been millions of dollars is being spent on this, you guys, to prove that 7 people conspired to keep an employee from coming to work. And throughout all of it, their grievances still are not being looked at. Okay, I don't see any main questions, so I'm going to go ahead and eat, and then I'll do Dwayne Schrock and Tim Puckett in just a minute, and then in that video I'll also do the update on what's to come for the week, because there's some more stuff coming, and I need to make these shorter. Alright, we're going to try this again. So this is going to be a continuation from court notes from yesterday, Friday. Yesterday, Friday. Yes, yesterday's Friday. The first testimony, I already recorded that yesterday. That was David Fry. After David Fry got off the stand, apparently myself and a few other people missed somebody who came up to the stand. If you guys remember the money bag that the guys took and kept because it had credit cards in it and whatnot, and it was listed as, I think it was like the Friends of the Malheur Wildlife Refuge community or committee. Apparently somebody from this group was requested to come in by Ryan, and I think we had stepped out for break and missed this, but Ryan was seeking information from this group, and it is connected to the wildlife employee that came back to the refuge while the guys were there and collected her belongings, and to my understanding stayed and actually worked for a little while. So I wasn't in the courtroom when this person from this group came, and the person was trying to get the judge to squash Ryan's motion to request information from this group, mainly I think the names of the people that were in this group, because that would help them identify the worker that came to the refuge. If I'm understanding that correctly, because I wasn't there, I stepped out. In the end, the judge had this person actually go and sit down next to Ryan and said that this person needed to give Ryan the information he was requesting. So then we came back from break, and Charles Snipes testified. He is a hay farmer who came to the refuge to see what was going on. Of course, his rights are important to him, and he knew Ryan, or Ammon and Ryan were speaking on that, as well as with LaVoy and many of the others. Before being a hay farmer in another state, he worked 30 years on the fire department. He went to the protest anytime they scheduled meetings. He witnessed it to be a peaceable environment, and he felt he was learning a lot. And then Neil's attorney asked if this man remembers speaking to Neil, and he said yes. The main things he spoke to Neil about were the habeas corpus needing to be filed for the Hammonds and how he wanted them out of jail. So then Dwayne Schrock took the stand. Dwayne he did a great job. He did appear to be nervous. Some of his answers almost seemed like they didn't apply to the questions that he was being asked. So I think maybe he had thought through some of the potential questions ahead of time and was a little bit nervous, but he did a great job. He was very courageous, very bold to come up and take the stand. Dwayne is a rancher he said that after Agent Ben Jones took the stand for the FBI a few weeks ago, he then traveled to Dwayne's house and had a meeting with him, even though Dwayne had previously been requesting to not meet with him and turning down his invitations to meet. So this Ben Jones traveled to Dwayne Schrock's house and had about a 30-minute conversation with him, asked many questions about the occupation. Dwayne told him he did not want to talk to him. He stated he came to Dwayne's ranch the day after he took the stand, that he was trying to influence and intimidate Dwayne as to how he would testify. So Dwayne's saying that this man learned that he would be a witness and then paid him a visit. He asked him questions that he then gave him the answer to. So in other words, the agent said, how many guns do you remember seeing at the refuge? There were a lot, correct? And trying to lead him into agreeing that he saw things he did not see. When Dwayne actually went to the refuge, which he said he went 3 days out of every week that the occupation was going on, he saw one long gun the time that he was there. And I actually learned from somebody who was helping with doing the greeting at the gate that it was actually required that during the day, when the public was coming and going from the refuge, that they had their guns put away. They weren't to have any visual guns present. They were only to be present by a few people that were doing basically like security, making sure that they were safe, that no provocateurs came into the refuge starting trouble, trying to bring any harm to anybody. When you want to depend on yourself for protection, and you don't want to have to, call for backup, it's pretty typical, especially out in Harney County, that you would be armed, but that the arms were not to be public. So the fact that Dwayne testified to only seeing one gun while he was at the refuge, because he was there during the days visiting, it makes perfect sense. And this agent wanted him to testify that the times he went there that he saw many, many, many guns at the refuge, and Dwayne was not going to do that. The other thing he wanted him to do is he wanted him to point out Ammon Bundy as the leader of the occupation. So I really believe, as I said in other videos, that the FBI would be very happy with a guilty verdict for only the Bundys, and that they would be fine to let the rest go. And that is further, I have got to stop saying you guys. That is further confirmation that that is a fact. When an FBI agent is saying, please point out that Ammon Bundy was the leader, he wanted him to physically point to him in the courtroom as the leader of the occupation, which Dwayne would not do because nobody was really leading this. Well, Ammon was the one who cared about the Hammonds and showed up to the county to stand up for them and intervene on their behalf. He was in no way the leader because they weren't doing some like organized event. He was simply wanting people to come who were willing to help get the lands put back into the people's hands. And so Ammon is a very good speaker, so he always ended up being the one in front of the cameras along with LaVoy, but there were many other people running the show, as you might say. And so Dwayne Schrock was not going to point out Ammon Bundy as the leader. They asked if he had been receiving threats or intimidation in any other ways. He said he's received many threats on his Facebook page. He had to delete that. He also said that he has cows in another state, I believe it was California, and that while they were inspected properly the first time, somebody came back a second time to inspect them again and told them that they came back because they heard that the cows he had were connected to the Bundys from Oregon. And so he basically felt like he was being harassed by these inspectors. I think they were branding inspectors because of where some of these cows had been in Oregon. He stated that the Hammonds were my neighbors and my friends. He was nominated to be on the Committee of Safety. I forgot to say yesterday how many objections were overruled and sustained, and I I actually need to add it up. What I'm seeing here is that for the defense, when the defense was on the stand, there were 56 objections by the prosecution, and of those, 50 of them were sustained. And I wrote down the other side of it too, and I want to say it was like 50-50 when the defense would object to something. I think they only objected 6 times throughout the entire day, and 3 of those times she overruled, 3 times she sustained the objections. But the defense isn't objecting very much. One, they don't have anything to hide, and 2, they don't have anything to hide. That was the same thing. Okay, did you see any guns? Did you bring a gun? And Dwayne said, I always travel with a gun. This is Harney County. And then the defense asked, so is it normal to have a gun in Harney County? And he said, absolutely. And then they did ask Dwayne what was his last conversation with Ryan Bundy. And when he went to answer that, it was objected because they said it was irrelevant to his current state of mind, or I'm sorry, to his state of mind at the refuge, and that they didn't need to know what his current state of mind was. And I keep going back to when Matthew was on the stand and how they asked him if he had put together the petition recently to have Judge Brown removed from her seat, and the fact that even though the defense objected to that, it was overruled because she said it goes to the witness's state of mind today. But then apparently anyway, it's a lot of hypocrisy going on in this courtroom. So after Dwayne, a rancher named Tim Puckett testified. He's from Burns, Oregon. He's been there 4 years. His family, his father, also ranchers, been ranchers his whole life. He lives a quarter mile from the refuge. He's actually the one who lives on the adjoining property to the refuge where Ammon cut the fence. The one day that he did, they asked, because the prosecution brought this up at the beginning, that they cut fence, destroyed, all this fencing. In the end, it was a very small stretch of fencing, and the fence was completely rotted and destroyed and was serving no purpose, meaning it wasn't actually going to be able to hold any animals in because of a previous flood, and all of the posts were completely rotted out. He also stated that it was his farmhand who gave Ammon permission to cut that fence. And you'll remember the fence because it was, of course, all over the news, and the prosecution introduced that, showing that they destroyed property. Now, when the prosecution cross-examined, they did ask the rancher if he owned the fence, and he said, well, this part of the fence was already up previous to my ownership. However, if it becomes destroyed or damaged for any reason, I am able to go and do repairs, take it down, put it back up, whatever I need to do to keep my cows from going onto the refuge property. So they were trying to make the point that he didn't have the authority to tell Ammon that he could cut that down. But at the end of the day, the fence wasn't actually serving a purpose anyway. He said, well, it looked like it was up and standing. The posts were rotted and need to be redone. So this man actually called in and testified by video, which I think that's the first time. We've had 1 or 2 phone calls, but not a video call. And then, I want to say there was one other person who took the stand, and now I'm not remembering, and my notes aren't showing. So I'm going to do a quick recap now, since this video will be short, of what is coming. So the judge really wants this to end. She continues saying that the jury's time is important and we need to wrap this up. She seems to forget that at the beginning this was planned to go well through November. So we are very, very, very ahead of schedule right now, but she really wants the defense to rest. But the defense has a few more witnesses they're going to be calling on Monday. They want the refuge employee to take the stand who actually entered the refuge and did work. Pretty important when your charges are you kept employees from coming to work. They have a video of LaVoy they want to play. We still need to play the video of LaVoy and Ryan taking down the video cameras and then stating that the FBI needed to come pick them up. again, in that message, the FBI, they were welcoming to come to the refuge and to pick up their cameras. So that video will be played so that Ryan can try to clear his name as far as the jury goes, showing that they in no way intended to deprive the owners of the cameras for any length of time. They wanted to actually return them after they took them down. So, okay, so Monday morning, LaVoy video, employee who entered the refuge. There was a note that they presented that it looked like LaVoy had written it, and it actually stated, take down cameras, return cameras to FBI. Now, they wouldn't let them enter this into evidence for the defense because they said that they needed to know who the owner of the notebook was. It was found in Ken Medenbach's vehicle when he drove it to Safeway. And so they wouldn't allow them to admit it because they didn't know whose notebook it was in, and the person needed to identify that LaVoy Finicum had in fact written that note. It sounds like they have identified where the note came from, and so that witness will potentially be coming on Monday to testify that that was LaVoy's handwriting, that he wrote the note, and that the memo was, we need to get these cameras taken down and then returned back to the FBI. Deborah, the team has been working on this, and they actually have a photo of the person that came to the refuge now, and a subpoena, my understanding is a subpoena has been issued. So, you guys can't hear me? Okay. Anyway, Tuesday. So Tuesday, the government will begin their rebuttal. The reason that they are getting to do a rebuttal on the Bunkerville information is because when Ammon took the stand and discussed Bunkerville, it opened it up for the government to be able to do a rebuttal on it. So whenever a witness brings forth information, the other side gets a chance to speak too. So Ammon testified in depth to Bunkerville, which gives the prosecution the opportunity to bring forth witnesses and paint their own picture of Bunkerville, because it could potentially cause the jury to only see Ammon's side of it and not see the government side. So the rebuttal is scheduled to take a half a day plus. They're bringing 5 witnesses to the stand. Judge Grasty is supposed to be taking the stand for them. The defense will get to cross-examine these people. This is going to be Tuesday. So half a day of rebuttal, and then they'll go through the jury instructions and get those finalized between prosecution and defense, because they do each get to contribute to some of the things that are in the jury instructions. And the jury instructions are absolutely insane. It's an entire book helping the jurors to understand the charges brought against them and how they are to determine if the defendants are guilty or innocent of the charges. And it's a lengthy book that they have. It's pretty over the top. And then, so Tuesday, jury instructions, closing arguments potentially for the prosecution. The prosecution wants 2.5 hours for closing arguments. And then the defense could be working on their closing arguments Wednesday. They're looking at, let's see, Ammon and Ryan want about 4 hours, Shauna Cox 30 minutes, David Fry 50 minutes, Jeff Banta 60 minutes, Ken Medenbach wants 60 minutes, and Neil said his closing arguments will be about 60 minutes. So you have a full day of closing arguments for the defense, and that's scheduled tentatively for Wednesday. That would mean Thursday would be issuing the jury instructions to the jurors, and then they would potentially be able to begin deliberating Thursday afternoon, and then they can do it also on Friday if they want. They typically haven't been working Fridays, but the judge is going to let them do Fridays to deliberate, and hopefully they can wrap this up. So Thursday, it could be getting handed over to the jury. I do not anticipate that will happen. I think the rebuttal is going to take much longer than is being expected with the witnesses that are coming forth for the government side, and I anticipate between closing arguments and jury instructions that still have to be beefed out. I think that's going to be an entire day. So I actually anticipate maybe Friday or next Monday it will be handed over to the jurors. A few people have asked if they should come to court this week. I think if you can only come a couple days, Thursday and Friday of this week would be the days that you potentially will be able to see the closing arguments. Definitely by Thursday, see closing arguments from at least the prosecution, if not the defense, and then we'll be hopefully wrapping things up. There was something else I was going to say. I can't remember. So I think that's it. I did want to say one thing that I had realized, the informants. That was what I was actually going to talk about. The judge had only received the redacted documents, and so she said there's like 130 documents that the prosecution presented with the redacted information about all of these informants. So she was going to spend the weekend reviewing those documents and trying to determine if the defense did or did not need to receive the information. We know that the Constitution states you have a right to go before your accusers, so they should definitely know who was feeding the information and what information was being fed to the FBI that allowed them to justify the ambush. We know that Mark McConnell lied about Ryan Payne, saying that Ryan Payne was going to do something to Sheriff Ward. That's information that impacted the decision to ambush these people on Highway 395. What other information was presented? Was it false information that was presented that caused the FBI to paint a picture of these people being scary armed terrorists when we know they were in fact not? So finding out who those 13 people are is important. One thing about that, and then I really will wrap this up, is that Agent Lapp, I think it was LAP, he actually lied under oath. He told us, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, he took the witness stand and he was asked many questions about the informants. He said it was his job to gather the information from the informants and to take that back to the FBI. The defense asked him, besides Mark McConnell, were there any other informants staying at the refuge? And I remember writing down, no other informants stayed at the refuge. Some of you who watched my live feed back then might remember that. He actually said that they stayed in Burns and traveled to and from the refuge gathering information. Now we know that he lied because Terry Linnell was subpoenaed and came out that she was an informant. That was just this week. Had the FBI disclosed, which is called a Brady violation, to not disclose information that's used to bring forth an arrest against somebody, had they disclosed that there were other informants at the refuge, the defense may have pushed sooner to know who they were, to make sure that they didn't call any of them as their witnesses. But because the prosecution withheld this information, they put people on the stand, still now not knowing if any of the defense witnesses have been informants, because the defense didn't ask questions asking, were you an informant? Terry Linnell actually volunteered that information on her own after she was subpoenaed. So it definitely creates a big mess that they have been lied to about these informants. Those names need to come out, and Agent Lapp needs to be held responsible for lying under oath, stating there were no informants staying overnight at the refuge. They all stayed in the town of Burns. With Terry Linnell, we know that was a lie, and as far as I'm concerned, that agent needs to be brought back on the stand and have his testimony impeached and shown that he was lying under oath and deceiving the defendants, and that was one of his primary responsibilities, was communicating with informants. So he knew Terry Linnell was staying at the refuge, and now we're figuring maybe some of the 13 were also staying at the refuge, since he wasn't being honest with us about Terry. So hopefully that will come out Monday in court, and we'll just move on from there. Or maybe there'll be an acquittal, and the government will realize that they've set these people up from beginning to end, and maybe the charges will be dropped. If not, then we'll just see it through to the end and get that not guilty verdict from the jury. So that's all. I'm down here in Portland. I'm going to go in and do a few visits and get out on a date with my hot husband who wants me off my phone. So that's that's all, guys. Have a good night, and I will talk to you all